Welcome to Chapter 19 and 20 of Turning Pro, a book club at go.fsbb.io. Let's get in today's Pulling the Pin. When I was 29, I spent a season picking apples in Chelan, Washington. This job sounds idyllic. I know, but it was hard work. It was migrant labor. The season lasted 6 weeks. It started with the Romes, then moved on to the Deliciouses. When the cold started, the wine snaps came in. These were the hardest to pick. They cut the flesh off your hands with their sharp, barbed spurs, particularly when you picked them up before the sun came up, with frost on the stems and your fingers frozen. One of the top pickers was a guy named Dave, who had been an infantryman with the 1st Marine Division at the Chosin Reservoir in Korea. November and December of 1950, when the temperatures fell to 30 below and the beleaguered American troops were surrounded by 67,000 soldiers of the Chinese Ninth Army, one of the most hellish and valiant ordeals of the U.S. military history. I asked Dave how he picked wine snaps. "With a great deal of pain," he said. Dave was a terrific guy, smart, funny, kind, and generous, who had chosen to live, quote, on the fritz, as the Wobblies used to say back in the 20s. He was a drinker who lived most of the year in an SRO hotel on Skid Row in Seattle. The term Skid Row, Dave told me, derived from the original Skid Road in Seattle, where the lumbermen used to slide their timber to the harbor on skids. But he came out on the camp at harvest time to work on the apples in Washington and cherries in Marysville, California. Dave got a veteran's disability check from Uncle Sam. He was such a good picker that he would put away a nice wad of cash for winter with a few months' labor in the fall. You get paid by the bin, 4 by 4 by 3 deep. For picking apples, you could go 2 a day when I started, never more than 3. Dave routinely knocked off 6, 7, and 8. We got $4 a bin, maybe 6, I can't remember. There was also a $1 a bin bonus at the end of the season if you stuck around. Dave stuck, and so did I. Most of the tramps, quote, pulled the pin. What is a tramp anyway? Dave explained. A tramp is an itinerant worker. A hobo is an itinerant non-worker. A bum is a non-itinerant non-worker. The term pulling the pin comes from the old days of riding the rails. To uncouple one car from another, the train crew pulled a heavy steel pin out of the coupling mechanism. In migrant lingo, pulling the pin meant quitting. You'd wake up the next day and the next bunk next to you would be empty. What happened to Jim? He pulled the pin. I could relate to pulling the pin. I pulled the pin on my first book, 99.9% of the way through. I pulled the pin on my marriage. I had never done anything in my life to that point where I hadn't pulled the pin. I was determined now not to pull the pin. I asked Dave why he and the other tramps drank wine. Hard liquor will destroy your liver, he said. Good whiskey is expensive, and the cheap stuff is poison. Beer? You have to drink a case minimum to get you where you need to get. If you don't have a car, how would you carry it? Plus, you're pissing all night long. Wine is the best. You can get a decent buzz on a bottle or two, and the stuff is made, at least partly, from a natural product, grapes. Who knows, there might even be a tad of nutrition in there, he would say. I was the only person in the bunkhouse who had a vehicle, so I gave everybody rides into town. Mostly they stayed on the orchard, though. Work started at first light, and by end of the day, most of the men were so tired they just wanted to kill a bottle or two and snug down under a blanket. I didn't drink. Instead, I talked to everyone. Jack was probably the coolest in the fruit tramps. He looked like Steve McQueen and was an ace car mechanic, as well as being almost as fast a picker as Dave. Jack used to cough up blood in such quantities that his pillow couldn't be laundered. They had to throw it away. I asked Jack why he didn't get a real job. He was going to kill himself, it was clear, if he stayed out on the road. Quote, I tried, man, many times. Last year, my sister's husband took me in, and from Enid, Oklahoma, where I'm from. I had a job, a nice apartment, even had a girlfriend. I asked him what happened. One morning, I just woke up, I couldn't take it anymore, and I just pulled the pin. Two things stuck out Two things struck me about the migrants in the bunkhouse. First, they were wonderful guys. They weren't crazy. They weren't stupid. They would teach you and help you. They'd share anything down to their last dollar. They were funny and smart. Many of them were readers. A good portion of them kept up with politics and had more insight to contribute than the paid pundits on the airwaves. Second, they had achieved a kind of peace that comes when you've already fallen so far that you don't have to worry about falling any farther. Worst comes to worst, Dave or Jack could have slept on the ground, foraged for grub. If the bomb went off tomorrow, they'd survive just fine. There was something very natural, I thought, about the life following the seasons. The human race did that for millions of years. When the season finished in Washington, the next crop was coming into harvest down in California. "You coming for cherries?" David would ask me. I wanted to. If I hadn't had a book I had to finish so I could stop pulling the pin, and my cat Mo to look after, I would have done it. I gave Dave a ride out into the highway. I could see him in my rear view with his thumb out, heading south, as I was going west. The life we call normal isn't normal at all. A spouse and a kid, a mortgage, a 9-to-5 job. Who said that was life? What's so great about working in a factory or in a cubicle? You and I, who are artists and entrepreneurs, live a life that's closer to natural, if you ask me. We migrate too. We follow the muse instead of the sun. When one crop is picked, we hit the road and move to the next. It's not a bad life. It's lonely. It's tough. It ain't for everyone. But like the life of a migrant on the road, it has its compensations. Dave may have been a drinker, and he certainly wasn't going to quit. But that was the life he had chosen. Would his mother and father, his sisters, or his ex-wife have picked this kind of life for him? Would he himself have elected it? But Dave was willing to pay the price for the choices he had made. He paid it in hard work and hard times and the looks people gave him when they passed him on the street. They didn't know Dave. He was a top hand and a good guy. He would never pull the pin. Dave was a pro. Man, I'll tell you, it is fascinating, these couple chapters about pulling the pin and Stephen Pressfield's experience with Dave and Jack as they picked fruits and they picked cherries to make things happen years and years and years ago. It's fascinating how men and women, but let's just say men, mostly, can fall into this type of trapping, into this type of career. It works, it's stable, it's known, and it's knowable. Now, nobody here is getting rich, but the stability is worth it just enough. And I wonder if that type of trapping is the type of trapping that you out there in the audience get caught up in. Are you in a place where you need to pull the pin? Are you in a place where it's time to pull the pin? Are you in a place where maybe, just maybe, you need to persevere? I wonder. And so the only question that I have for you today is the question that Stephen Pressfield left. Would your mother or father, your sisters, or your ex-wife, or your relatives, have picked the life that you have for you? And number two, would you yourself have picked this career and life for yourself? That, my friends, is worth considering.